Good evening, everyone. If you want to be opening up your Bibles to John chapter 12, that's where we're going to be beginning our study tonight. John chapter 12. I'm running just a minute behind, so I'll get organized here, and then we'll dive into our study. We are studying the fourfold gospel, trying to cover all four gospels together over a 2-quarter period, and we're getting down toward the end. We've got about 6 periods left, including tonight, and we're on lesson 19 in this Gene Taylor material that accompanies the fourfold gospel book. And we've been using that largely as a study guide, right? So if you don't have every answer filled out for every question, there's quite a few. That's okay, because we don't go over each of those in class. Hopefully it helps guide your study through the McGarvey material, which shows how the Gospels fit together and give a fuller picture on many of these accounts, these stories that sometimes we study one Gospel at a time. We'll see a few of those this evening where all 4 Gospels record the same event, and you get a fuller picture by looking at all of those together. All right. So as we've been doing, I'm putting my notes up on the screen and trying to summarize a bit on what we are going to discuss in one big picture, rather than leaving you to kind of guess which parts of the lesson we're going to focus on tonight, so that you can kind of see where we're going and think about what comments you'd like to add or questions you have as we go through that study. But as you can see, we're moving into lesson 19 tonight. Didn't get a chance to finish all of lesson 18 last week, but for sake of time, we want to cover 19 this week. Next week, we would like to cover 20 and 21. So just note that down, that you'll want to prepare lessons 20 and 21 in your studies. I'll be out of town the following week, and Jesse Flowers will cover 22. Hopefully not too much of 21 will be left over. And then we'll have 3 weeks after that to finish it out. This page, this title, The Last Week of the Life of Jesus, is the title of this and the next 6 lessons. So we're studying the last week of the life of Christ for a total of 7 lessons, lessons 19 through 25. Of course, that last week takes us all the way from these events in Bethany up into and through the death of Jesus on the cross and his burial. And then there's one lesson that covers his resurrection and his ascension and all the appearances after that are in between. Which is a very crucial lesson, so I definitely want to make sure we at least have 1 full week with nothing bleeding over from these other lessons to talk about that, because one of the real values of a harmony study or a fourfold study is to look at the way these accounts harmonize. Because you will run into those who will want to criticize the scriptures and claim that these accounts disagree with one another and cannot be harmonized, and that's not the case. Different perspectives on the same story can all be true at the same time, and it's really valuable to see that, to prepare ourselves to defend the scriptures, to defend our faith. Okay, so we're in the first of those, which is lesson 19 tonight, and just summing that up, I saw a number of T's in tonight's lesson. We'll talk about the triumphal entry. He then goes into Jerusalem and overturns the tables once again, and then he's teaching. So within this final week, with just a few days before he's going to be hanging on the cross, he is spending so much time teaching the people who are thronging to him, and the Jews are bringing those final tests. And we'll see all the way up to the point where they got to the point where they decided, we're not going to try him anymore, because he answers everything so well. So we'll go through these events. The events in Bethany, where Mary anoints Jesus, are there in John chapter 12. And that's either Thursday or Friday before his death. And we know that according to the scriptures, he dies on that Friday. Of course, the Passover meal was eaten on that Thursday night, so we'll get to that. So when it says in John chapter 12 that it was 6 days before the Passover, John 12 verse 1, we know that it's that Thursday or Friday night. And that triumphal entry, of course, is on the first day of the week, on the Sunday. So here he is. He comes to Bethany, and we noted the map last week and how he's come kind of across the Jordan and moving from east to west toward Jerusalem. And they come to Bethany, which is on that road from Jericho to Jerusalem. And Bethany is on, as McGarvey described it, on that eastern slope of the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives being right across the valley from Jerusalem. And so sometimes it'll mention him going out of Jerusalem and lodging on the Mount of Olives, which may or may not mean that he was lodging in Bethany, right? In one of these places like with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, or perhaps somewhere else in the city, or perhaps on the mountain itself, as we know that he does at times stay outside. So he comes to Bethany, and we see, as we studied last week, what was the major event the major miracle in the city of Bethany? The raising of Lazarus. And so now you have this event in John 12 where he's there at the house and Lazarus is there. A huge testimony to the fact that a miracle has taken place, his mere presence. And it was such a significant miracle. He'd been dead 4 days. There was no doubt. There was even doubt from these faithful believers like Martha and Mary who said, there's going to be an odor. Let's not open the tomb. Everybody knew that he was dead. And so his existence is a proof of who Jesus is, and we're going to see how that continues to bear fruit. Let's read John 12, starting in verse 1 through 11. Why don't we start on this side this time? If we start with Miss Shirley, and we'll go one verse apiece, and if you prefer not to read, just pass to the person next to you.
In 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, who he had been dead, whom he had raised from the dead.
There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with them. Then Mary, about to go on another.
Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume.
But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he who was about to betray him, said,
Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?
He didn't say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He was in charge of the money bag and would steal part of what was put in it.
But Jesus said, Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial.
Now, a great many of the Jews knew that he was there. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always.
Now a great many of the Jews knew that he was there, and they came, not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead.
The chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death also.
and because of an account of the many, I'm sorry. I'm skipping because of my glasses, so.
That's just fine. I'll finish that, Miss Rhoda. It says, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and were believing in Jesus. We'll pause there.
I wear trifocals, and when I move my face, I moved it too far, and I couldn't find my place.
That must be complicated. We appreciate that. So this feast, we have an event where Mary, as it's titled in my Bible, Mary anoints Jesus. What's the significance of that concept of anointing with Jesus?
King.
What's that?
King.
A king is anointed, right? Both kings and prophets were anointed in the Old Testament. And what does that word translate to in Greek? The anointing? It's the word in Greek is Christ. In Hebrew is Messiah. And so this concept of being the anointed one is the idea of being the Christ. How does this differ from the last time there was a woman who was wiping his feet at a feast? Yeah, last time it was tears. There's no mention of tears here. Of course, there's going to be tears in a week, but at this point, it was more of a sacrifice to show how revered and honored he was. And so she's anointed, she's poured it on his head, and she is wiping his feet with her hair, but she's wiping it with that fragrant perfume. What does Jesus say that she has done? Prepared him for burial. Who is it that criticizes her actions? Judas. And you may have noted in the fourfold gospel, many of his disciples joined in as well. Judas may have been the ringleader. And note that the King James Version even refers to him, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son. And so maybe he has some position of prominence here at Simon's house. This leper I assume has been healed by Jesus, but Judas being the son of Simon. If that additional phrase in verse 4 is valid. And so Judas, he criticizes because of what attribute? Greed? Yeah, that's right. He's not so much interested in the poor as in himself. And in being able to have more money in the money box that he can pilfer from. And so he's being selfish, which is different. One of the key reasons why I don't connect it to the prior event, right? Because that's a different lesson than was taught when we previously saw that way up in Cana in Galilee that a woman washes his feet with her tears, and it's Simon, the Pharisee, who was the one who criticized and said a similar thing. Well, she does he not know who this woman is? And then Jesus teaches what lesson to Simon the Pharisee? Do you recall? Teaches him a parable about two debts. There's one who owed a lot and one who owed a little. Both were forgiven. Who's going to love him more? So different lesson, different place, different lesson, different critic. Here the critics are Jesus' own disciples. And they still don't seem to understand what's about to happen. And he's emphasizing with every chance he gets that he's going to his death. She's preparing me for burial. And she seems to understand that. Any thoughts on that event? Anything to add? Norm?
I just thought it interesting that Martha's doing the same thing she was doing before.
Yeah, she's serving, isn't she?
She's serving.
Not even her house, right? Yeah, I know a few ladies like that. That it doesn't matter where they are, they're going to be looking for what needs done and taking care of it. And so she's certainly has a servant's heart.
A lot of
Yes, Shirley?
people were to make him king on earth.
Right. Right. And that's been the people's desire has been to make him king. He's resisted that. And we're now going to see a transition where he's willing to accept these signs of kingship because his hour has come. So many times he's said, my hour has not yet come. And now his hour has come. So he receives the anointing, and now he's going to this triumphal entry, where once again he's accepting the position as king. And verses 9 through 11 that we read just mention that people were coming and were wanting to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. And verse 10, the chief priests wanted to put Lazarus to death also, because on his account, many of the Jews were going away and were believing in Jesus. Now let's pick up the reading here with Bonnie if we can, and let's do 12 through 19.
On the next day, the large crowd who had come to the feast, when they heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem,
Took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him and cried out, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel.
Then Jesus, when he had found a young donkey, sat on it, as it is written.
Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, sitting on a donkey's colt.
His disciples did not understand these things at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that these things were written about him and that they had done these things to him.
Therefore the people who were with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead bore witness.
For this reason the people also met him, because they heard that he had done the sign.
So the Pharisees said to one another, you see that you are not doing any good. Look, the world has gone after him.
The world has gone after him. This is a massive event. There's people coming from all directions to be with Jesus as he goes into the city in such a triumphal way. It mentions the people coming who had been influenced by the Lazarus event. And so if we recall, he's gone through Jericho. We didn't get much time to spend on that last week, where he meets Zacchaeus. He heals Bartimaeus, the blind man, and another blind man who was with him. And so there's a crowd that's, this is pilgrimage time. Everybody's going to Jerusalem for the Passover. And so there's caravans of people streaming into Jerusalem. I think the number was estimated to around 3 million Jews would come into the city. About half of all Judah and Samaria. And so throngs of people. So the more events that he continues to do with the healings, healing Lazarus, healing the blind, people are continuing to throng to him. And so they're coming with him. And he, as we note in some of the other Gospels, he arranges to have a colt brought to him to ride on into the city. Why did he choose to enter the city in such a manner? Was that Kiana?
Zacharias.
Because of Zechariah. So there was a prophecy there. And it's quoted here in John 12, verse 15, Zechariah 9:9. Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt. There's a little bit longer quotation in some of the other Gospels. What attribute is emphasized in Zechariah?
Lowly.
What was that?
Lowly?
Lowly, yeah. Humility, gentle, I think is the word in the New American Standard. So he chooses this mode of entry because it conveys a certain attitude, but it's also a recognition that he is king, right? Because it's there in the text. Your king is coming to you seated on a donkey's colt. So he's, again, willing to take that title and for the crowds to recognize his position. They get it, right? What do they cry out? What was that? Hosanna. We like to sing Hosanna. What do we mean when we say that? Singing with the understanding.
Save us now.
Save us. There's an entreaty built into the word that was pointed out. The N-A at the end is the I pray, or please, or now. Please save us. And so the word has that salvation sense. Save us. And so they say, Hosanna to the Son of David. What's the connection to David when he goes into the city on a donkey? We've studied David recently. What's the connection there?
he would have someone on the throne
There was, 2 Samuel 7 has the promise that the son of David would have an eternal kingdom, and he would always have a man on the throne. Of course, that was interrupted because of Israel's sin, but ultimately fulfilled in Christ, who receives that eternal throne, the throne of David, which is actually at the right hand of God. But what about this idea of entering the city on a donkey?
David did that.
Close. Did David? Solomon.
Who was it, Solomon?
Right? So as there's a scuffle for who's going to come after David, Nathan and Bathsheba arranged to have Solomon coronated, and they have him ride into the city on a donkey, showing the same characteristic of peace, gentleness, just the rightful heir, right? Not needing to take it by force, but being the one who was selected by David and certified by the prophet Nathan as the rightful heir. And that title that Jesus wears, Prince of Peace, fits so well, and fits well with Solomon, right? David was a man of war, Solomon a prince of peace, right? The prince being son of David. So Hosanna to the son of David. They see the son of David entering the city on a colt, just as some had seen 1,000 years ago with Solomon. This event is in all 4 Gospels. What does that tell you? What's that?
The importance
It's pretty important. And we've noted how John likely writes his Gospel after the other 3. He's probably familiar with that content, and yet here he is recording the event, such a significant event. He enters the city. It mentions the people who are with him. It also mentions people in the city coming out to him and beginning this chant or this praise to the Son of David. Does Jesus rebuke them for those statements?
No.
If he was just a man, he should. But no, he's worthy of every praise. Who is it that suggests that he should rebuke them? Yeah, you can. Yeah, the Pharisees. It's not mentioned here in John, but the Pharisees over in Luke 19, verse 39, say, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples," because a man should not receive these types of praises, right? As he goes on into the city and goes to the temple, if you flip over to Matthew 21. Matthew 21, and the sequence of these events might be a little difficult to know, but Matthew 21, let's look at verses 14 through 17. He goes to the temple, and then 14 through 17, the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things that he had done, and the children who were shouting in the temple, "Hosanna to the Son of David," they became indignant and said to him, "Do you hear what these children are saying?" And Jesus said to them, "Yes. Have you never read, out of the mouth of infants and nursing babies, you have prepared praise for yourself?" So on 2 instances, he's challenged. Why are you allowing this? On the way into the city, they say, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." It was the Pharisees who were there in the crowd, coming along with him. What does he say in response to them? You recall?
Even the stone would yell out.
What an amazing thought. If these were silenced, then even the stones would cry out this truth, that this is the Son of David coming to his city. It's also noted in this time as he's entering the city, he weeps over Jerusalem, which we didn't have time to go over that specific detail, but he weeps over the city who had killed the prophets and was now going to kill the very Son of God as he comes to the city. Okay, any thoughts on his triumphal entry beyond that? Sam?
So, just a question. The praises that are given to him when he's entering, are those
I don't know that they had such a distinction as what you're making, where I don't think they would say they were okay with him claiming to be the Messiah. And it's hard to know exactly what the people had in their minds. I'm sure they still had very much of an earthly kingdom in mind. But the Son of God, the Messiah being the Son of God, was not clearly understood by many. And so this claim of messiahship was still very much a threat to the Jewish leadership. That they say we've got to put him to death or we're going to lose our place and our nation. And as they said here in John 12, we're not doing any good. John 12:19, look, the world has gone after him. So the simple following that he's receiving is displacing them from their power. So I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you did.
Touched on a few things there. Okay. So that's Sunday. Quite an event to go into the city this way as they're cutting the branches and laying their coats down. It's very much a picture of that Roman triumph, right? As a conqueror would come into the city through the gate, and the city would laud the praises of the Roman ruler or the general. Jesus rides in triumph into the city to receive his position as king. It's on the next day, on Monday, that he's going into the city. He retires from the city each night, back out to Bethany. So you think of this trip from Bethany into the city, and then a return trip the same day. And it's on the next morning that Monday, as he goes in, he cleanses the temple. And it's on this event that he curses the fig tree. The cleansing of the temple, we saw this once before. As we studied through the chronology, McGarvey has 4 Passovers identified in the scripture, which gives you a 3-year period. His ministry essentially beginning before the first Passover, 2 in those center spots, and then the 4th one being where Jesus dies on the cross. And so it's been a full 3 years since his first Passover visit, where he again cleanses the temple. What type of other actions was he taking in the temple here in this instance? I'm going to flip over to Mark 11, but you may have that in your notes. What's he doing? He's
Teaching and preaching.
He's teaching and preaching, but as he overturns the tables, what's he clearing? What's he doing, and what's he removing from the temple at that time?
Money changers.
So you've got money changers, people selling doves. If you're in Mark 11, you also see verse 16, he would not permit anyone to carry merchandise through the temple. So it's not just a small group or corner of the temple where he's maybe, clearing out a group of salesmen. It's all the merchandise, transportation, profaning of his Father's house that Jesus is getting rid of. It's going to create quite a commotion, right? It's going to impact many people. McGarvey noted that the temple, being so central to the city, was a convenient pass-through. It's like a intersection point. Like, I just need to get from the south side of town to the north side of town. So they're passing through the temple with their merchandise as if it's nothing, as if it's some kind of busy intersection. That's not the proper respect for the Lord's house. Just like it was prophesied, zeal for your house will consume me. Jesus is consumed with zeal for the temple, and this is very much the fulfillment of that glory of the Lord that fills his house, right? Jesus, who is God in the flesh, has now come into his temple and is about to be glorified. As he continually mentions, it's now time for the Son of Man to be glorified. And so He's not in a glorified form. People can't tell him from the rest of his disciples, and yet he is God in his temple, and he's zealous to cleanse it and to make it pure and for God to be revered as he should be. Randy?
Not only did he's talking about the material, but he compared it to a den of thieves, and thieves, in a den splitting up their loot.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well. A den of thieves, where these I'm sure have an air of good intentions. So you need to come and buy your lamb to sacrifice, or you need to convert your money from this to that so that you can buy and sell. But there's obviously the implication there is there's robbery going on, there's sinful behavior going on, but it's certainly not the intent for that place, but to even have sin on top of that happening in that place drove Jesus to these types of actions. What do you make of the cursing of the fig tree? It's on his way into town. He passes a fig tree, and Jesus curses it. What lesson do you take from the cursing of the fig tree? It's a bit perplexing because was it the time of year for fruit? It was not. It said there weren't even any leaves on it yet. McGarvey noted that the leaves come first and the fruit comes later. So Norm, thoughts on that?
There is no telling when he will come, and you need to be ready for whenever he comes with whatever he asks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was probably it perplexed everyone that saw it. But it's not something he hasn't said since the beginning. The time will come like a thief in the night. If you knew when it was coming, if you knew the proper season, you'd be ready. But it doesn't matter the season. Be ready.
Mm-hmm. And he's going to teach so many parables in these last couple of days about that we'll see that common element in so many parables where the master gives his disciples or his servants a task, and then he goes away for a long time. And that's a period of testing. This idea that the master's gone. Should I obey him or should I not obey him? And then you don't know when he's going to come. And the master returns. And it's like, give me an account. Are you doing what's faithful? Are you taking care of your fellow servants in one place? Or do you have do the virgins have the oil they need for the feast or for the wedding? Are you ready? So that could be one of the lessons here. I think there's another potential connection to this just concept of the Jews and the judgment that's coming upon the Jewish nation. This fruitless tree. There's a picture there of just a fruitless tree, and it's no longer acceptable to God, no longer acceptable to Jesus. And so it's what has happened. It's not the season for fruit, and yes, he was hungry and wished he had some fruit. I don't see this as some sort of a outburst. Certainly no lack of self-control on Jesus' part. Everything he does is deliberate. And yes, he wishes there was fruit on that tree, but he takes it as an opportunity to teach through an image that a fruitless tree is going to be destroyed. And as they come the next morning, they see that it, in one day, has withered all the way down to the roots because of the rebuke of Jesus. Any other thoughts or questions on that?
He's also talking about faith,
Yes?
having faith in God, because he said if you had enough faith, then you could say, remove this mountain, cast it into the sea. But if you have doubt in your heart, it's not going to work.
Yes, absolutely. And so he's giving them the instruction that they shouldn't be amazed that such a thing could happen. With the power of God, they can do similar things if that's the will of God. Randy?
So McGarvey talked a little bit about it, and really Jesus was expecting fruit to be on it because he was hungry. And so he mentioned that there were different varieties of these fig trees. And it's a possibility that this particular one would have had fruit on it, depending on what variety it was. But, I was thinking, so the fig tree had, some leaves. I mean, Jesus was kind of expecting it to have fruit, and compare that to the scribes and the Pharisees. You know, that they're expected to be the ones that bear fruit, and so he condemns them as well. And like the tree withered up, that it'll be thrown, destroyed. In the same way with those that should be bearing fruit that are not.
Okay, yeah. Good point. Shirley?
Well, he's questioning their faith. This particular cow.
Yes. Yep, he's wanting his disciples to have faith so as to not be amazed that such a thing could happen. That they could say to this mountain, be cast into the sea, and it could be moved. That there was some good discussion there in McGarvey's material as well on what we should expect, and how in context here he's talking to his disciples who were going to, of course, be working in this age of miracles and going through some very challenging trials, and that they would be needing the faith to overcome and to do the works of God that God would give them to do. Norm, was there another hand?
Yeah, this is another, we give them, the apostles, the disciples, a lot of grief for, how did they miss this thing? He's walked on water, he's raised the dead, he's done all these, he's spoken to a storm and just calmed the sea, and he just tells the tree, hey, you're never going to bear fruit again. And they're like, that worked. And we give them a lot of grief for that. But it's evidence after evidence after evidence that is being provided for us today. That it is not the miracle that has the power.
Mm-hmm.
It is the words. Because here it is, another fantastical, miraculous thing, and they still didn't get it. And we are no different today. People are like, oh, if I saw that, I would be all in. And it's, no, you wouldn't. Because the ones who were closest to him, that knew for a fact it was absolutely possible, didn't get it.
Right.
It is not the miracle that has the power, it is the words he speaks.
Yeah, great point, Norm. So let's talk about Tuesday for a few minutes. As he goes into the temple, of course, it says that he was teaching the people every day. So some of this may actually be Monday and Tuesday. Of course, his trial is going to really ramp up as we move on through the week. But the testing that people bring, the first thing they bring is this question of authority. By what authority do you do these things? What's the context of that question? What things?
Well, he's been preaching daily in the temple, and then he's cleansed the temple. And
Right.
run out those who had merchandise, as you said.
Right. So he's taking very much a control of this temple environment that the chief priests and elders thought that they're in charge of. So by what authority? He, of course, responds with this question about the baptism of John. How is it that they answer that question? Francis? They said, we do not know. And how do they decide that should be their answer?
Because if they said that he was from God, then they want to know why they didn't follow him. And then the men, the people, they feared them because they thought John was the prophet.
Right. So, did they know? Yeah, they knew. But when they said, we do not know, that was a lie. They knew the answer to the question. They were trying to decide what's the right strategic answer. And so it's interesting if you're in Mark 11, verse 33, when they say, we do not know, Jesus said to them, nor will I tell you by what authority I do these things. If it was true that they did not know, he might have answered, well, I don't know the answer to your question either. But he says, neither will I tell you. Which implies that it's not a matter of did they know or did they not know, it's what were they willing to tell. What they should have said in all honesty is we will not tell, which is also a dishonest answer where they're unwilling to answer an obvious question. And so we've talked at length about the importance of the question having authority. And Jesus' authority, of course, is coming from God, just like the baptism of John was from God. They're going to be in trouble either way. That's right. Their questions, Jesus has a knowledgeable answer. His questions to them, they can't answer. They're actually stumped by the questions that he brings. But it's neat to see these four things together. He goes on to teach after that question, right? The parable of the two sons. We're familiar with that parable. One says he'll obey and does not. The other one says he's not going to obey, but then does. And so that lesson was taught for what purpose?
The tax collectors and the harlots, they heard and believed John's preaching, repented, and they did not. The leaders of the Jews.
Yeah, he's comparing the chief priests and elders to the sons who say that they'll obey, but they don't obey. Compared to these prostitutes and tax collectors who initially, of course, are living a sinful lifestyle, disobeying God, but when given the opportunity to enter the kingdom of heaven, they're ready to go. They're ready to enter. They're flocking to Jesus. And so he says, they will enter the kingdom before you, rebuking these men who ask him for his authority. Then this parable of the landowner, or the wicked vine growers, or one translation says the parable of the tenants. What's the message of that parable? What have these men been doing, Clarissa?
So God would be like the vine owner, and his people, the Jewish nation, were kind of like the stewards, the ones that were to care for it. But they obviously mistreated the servants, which would be probably all the prophets and things, and then ultimately Jesus, the Son, that were killed.
Imagine how haunting it would be to hear Jesus to say, verse 38 in Matthew 21:38, but when the vine growers saw the Son, they said among themselves, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him and seize his inheritance. It's almost like, has he been listening to our private conversations? How does he know that we wanted to do that? That's exactly what they were going to do to Jesus, and he prophesies it right here in this parable. This idea of them rejecting the chief cornerstone. All right, we'll pick up a bit there next week if we can, and also try to cover the next two lessons.